In the year of our Lord 2000, I attended an open house for the Motion Picture Institute of Michigan, the film school I was planning to attend after graduating high school. In 2001, I graduated from said high school, and in 2002, I actually got around to mailing in my application. I even got an acceptance letter back. Finally, in 2004, I actually began attending the one-year program that I could have completed 3 times by that point. I found almost all of the classes interesting and informative, but the one exception was the screenwriting course. I'm not a writer, and I didn't aspire to become one, but passing was a requirement for completing the program, and writing a short narrative screenplay was a requirement for passing the class. Thankfully, I was eventually struck with enough inspiration to crank out one such script. It was titled Damnbulance, and its plot isn't super relevant to the story I'm telling now, but just for context, it's about 2 paramedics who believe God has instructed them to allow certain people to die in their care so their organs can be donated to more worthy persons. As a non-writer, I was actually pretty proud of the finished product. I even thought if I could get a budget together, it could make for a really good first post-film school project. I figured it was at least an A-worthy assignment, maybe B+. My screenwriting teacher felt it was more like a C. So I guess, what do I know about screenwriting? I'm not the one who wrote the Schwarzenegger and Sinbad surprise holiday hit film Jingle All the Way. And according to one federal judge, neither was my screenwriting teacher. Moving on, I completed film school and moved here to Michigan in order to take advantage of the film tax incentives bringing productions to the area and to work with the contacts I'd made in film school. That script always stuck around in my head, though. I really believed it had potential. Every so often I would pull it out and make some changes or have another screenwriter give it a once-over, and it seemed to be getting better with each draft. I even had some paramedic friends read it to try and ensure it was somewhat realistic. That resulted in one friend's mom throwing it away before finishing the first page. I probably didn't need to make the first line of the script a Holocaust denial reference, but it was only 15 pages, and I wanted to establish the antagonist right away. In 2008, I decided the time had come to make my grand cinematic statement and film this thing. The first thing I had to secure was an ambulance. Thankfully, my parents actually liked the script and supported my filming of it, and so they convinced a friend who owned a paramedic service to let me use one of their units for a day. What I thought would be the biggest obstacle turned out to be the easiest part. Next, I needed a cast. Since the ambulance was in Ohio, I would have to film there, and so I created a Craigslist ad and rented a room at the library in my hometown to hold auditions for the 2 main roles. I received several emails and booked the appointments, and even scheduled a photo shoot for some images I would need on some props. I drove to Ohio that day and waited, and waited, and waited. Eventually, one person showed up, and honestly, his audition wasn't great. The photo shoot was a bit of a bust, too, with nothing turning out how I was imagining it. So I canceled the shoot and moved the script to the back of my mind again. A couple of years later, I tried again using the same setup as the first time. This time, absolutely nobody showed up to the audition, and again, my film was dead before it began. Finally, in 2012, I scrapped all of my old plans and started with a new approach. This time, I would try to shoot it here, where I actually knew actors and filmmakers and had my own connections for an ambulance and filming locations. This time, it actually worked. I filmed Damnbulance. Now I just had to send it out into the world, and my real film career could begin. I wanted to make the very first screening special, so I put it in the lineup to play at a fundraiser film screening/concert for the film festival I had co-founded that year. Everything was coming together very nicely. Until it didn't. Just like with my auditions in Ohio, not one soul showed up to our fundraiser. The owner of the venue even revoked his donation of the space and said we had to pay him after all. Even though he was one of the stars of my film, We held a fundraiser, and when it was over, we had less funds than when we started. Damnbulance did eventually play at some film festivals with audiences in attendance. It even won an award for Best Drama at one, despite one audience member laughing hysterically through portions of it. But these were small, local film festivals that I had pre-existing connections with. I still believed in the film and its potential for being my big break. Then it finally happened. Damnbulance was accepted into the Buffalo Niagara Film Festival in Buffalo, New York. This was a festival I had heard of, a festival which had screened some films I had actually seen, and a festival which had a roster of celebrities among its previous attendees. At least, the website presented it that way, and so I was determined to be there for the screening. I was going to meet the industry professionals in attendance and finally start making the necessary connections to start getting film work outside of my bubble. I was so excited and nervous about this opportunity that when I was interrogated at the border to cross into Canada for the first time in my life, I had to correct my answers to more than one question, prompting the guard to really take his time on allowing me through. But I did eventually make it and arrive in Buffalo at the theater where the festival was happening. I was ready for a grand celebration of cinema with spotlights, red carpet, fancy outfits, and adult beverages. What I found waiting for me was an empty lobby of a standard multiplex theater operated by 3 bored employees at the concession stand and 1 teen volunteer at a folding table who had trouble finding my name on the filmmaker list because it was, of course, spelled wrong. The actual screening itself was worse. I sat in the back hoping to observe the audience, an audience which consisted of no more than 15 people, 3 of whom were fairly inebriated and possibly in the wrong auditorium, but nonetheless seated directly in front of me. When Damnbulance finally played, one of the 3 loudly proclaimed, "Is this film actually serious?" before she and her group got up and walked out. It was a long drive home that night, literally and figuratively. But that was it. The end of my one big shot at a break. The end of my dream of a career in filmmaking. And the end of this story.